Hi, and thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership Simple and Beyond. That is Robert Hilliard. I am Whitney Wiley, and we are here on Thursdays, 12 noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, talking all things leadership. And today we're going to talk about successful leaders, leading successfully leading, all of that. What you need to do to be successful. And Robert, I will give you an opportunity to share your opening thoughts on this.
Well, this is funny because when we talked about this, I thought about, you know, what do successful leaders do? And that prompted me to list out what successful leaders do. And then I looked at this list and said, successful leaders do more than this. Right? But these are things that I think that most successful leaders
Yep.
do, something they have in common. Of course, there are going to be some things that some leaders do that others do not. But this is, I think a good starting point.
Awesome. So we'll see how our lists dovetail. And well, because that's what we do around here, right? You have thoughts, I have thoughts. Sometimes our thoughts are perfectly aligned. Sometimes they are aligned, but not perfectly. And sometimes we have differences of opinion, and that's all good, right? And that happens with leaders as well. What you just said. This is, we'll be talking about things that most of them have in common, but there are going to be some that are going to bring other things to the table. So that's what makes it interesting and exciting.
Spoiler alert, that's on my list. So,
all right. Well, let's get started. You go ahead and launch your list, and I will get in where I fit in.
Okay, so I guess we'll do one for me, one for you. I have 10 things. We didn't discuss how many things, but
I just came up with 5. I was like, we only have so much time. So.
Yeah, exactly. I was
but I bet
I should have pared this down, but we'll see.
Well, we'll get to as many as we can, and whatever we don't, we'll have a part 2.
There you go.
Problem solved.
Yeah.
Which is another thing I bet is on your list.
Maybe. We'll see. So the first thing I have here is leaders create and share a compelling vision. I'm pretty sure that's on your list too.
Yes.
That's
on my list.
Talk about all the time. Right. So they create and share a compelling vision, because without a vision, you have nothing. You have to have a destination, a goal. Other than that, you're just spinning around. And there are a lot of leaders out there that just, they get promoted or they inherit a title, and that does happen. And they just kind of sit back and let the wind carry them wherever it may. But as a leader, an effective or a successful leader will have a compelling shared vision. And it's that what we mean by compelling is something that draws people to that vision. It's not just, hey, I want us to be the best fill in the blank, but a very vivid, a very emotional, it can something that people can latch on to emotionally, and it pulls people into their vision, so that there is, that's the shared part. It connects with people on that level and allows them to get behind it.
Absolutely. And that vision helps, like you said, to provide the direction so that everyone knows where they're going. A visual would be if you were all in a boat rowing. You don't want people rowing in different directions, or right. You've got one person is rowing this way and someone else that's rowing that way. You end up like spinning your boat in circles. And so you want to avoid that. So here's some additional things that I thought would be helpful for the conversation, is not just the list, but to add some practical tips that a leader could employ. And then because I'm all about simple, is tying it in to each one into some principles of simple. So, um, how can you, you know, create and communicate this clear and compelling vision? Right, you can obviously hold meetings, but workshops with your team to make sure that you're collaborative in defining what that vision is and making sure everyone has buy-in. Otherwise, it could be compelling, it could be clear, but if people haven't bought in, then there you are sort of spinning your wheels because people are doing their own thing. And it that requires communicating regularly, communicating clearly, communicating often, right? And making sure that people have the opportunity to ask questions, to get clarity, make sure that this is not you just saying, this is what we're doing. It could be clear and compelling, but again, if people haven't bought in or they don't understand, you're going to have challenges. And then the last piece, the practical tip for this is leading by example, right? Demonstrating the behaviors and decisions that are in alignment with the vision so that they see that you haven't just put this out there as that one more thing, but that you're bought in as well.
I'm chuckling because as you were saying that, you were pulling in my second item that's on my list, which is demonstrate role model behavior. You need to be a role model. And this takes me back to when I was a kid and I would see my mother doing something and I would do it and she would yell at me for doing it. And I would say, but you did it. And she goes, do what I say, not what I do. Right. But that's, leaders, they walk the talk. If they're telling you to do it, they're going to be doing it. Successful leaders do that. And so that is number 2 on my list. And to touch on 2 things that you mentioned, well, one thing that you mentioned earlier is connected to simple. When you have that compelling vision, you are using mastery to master your message so that you know the points you want to touch on. You have practiced this message. It could be by yourself. It could be, you could have recorded it. You could have gotten a beta group together and practiced in front of them so you know what's going to hit and what's not going to hit or land with your group. The other part of it is intentionality, being intentional, making sure that you are very intentional about what you're putting forward and how you are going to do that. And that really works for both of these, for 1 and 2.
Absolutely. And I would just add, I absolutely in alignment with the intentionality piece, right? That if you are not intentional, right, it's difficult to focus on where you're going, where you're trying to lead the team. And so intentionality ensures that every action that you're taking aligns with the direction that you're moving in. So I agree.
Absolutely. So number 3 on my list is successful leaders, and this may shock you. They embrace new trends and technology because I am not on the leading edge of that stuff. But they don't actually have to always incorporate it, but they need to be aware of it and understand that it can change the game for their company, for their industry. I work for many leaders that, the computer baffled them. You'd see them in there typing like a praying mantis. And I'd be like, I remember I used to have this conversation with a former manager that I worked for. And the joke that I would always say to him was like, computers aren't a fad. They're not going away. Because it was almost weekly, some aspect of the computer would baffle and confound him. It was like, I almost envisioned him at his desk with a monocle, going, what is this newfangled contraption. And I was like, it is a computer. They've been around for decades. They're not going away. There's no reason for you to be typing like a praying mantis. Understand that technology is going to, how it will impact your team, your organization, or your industry. Some people we talked about that. One of the examples is Kodak. I think you brought them up, and film. What I didn't know is they did have somebody in their organization that pitched digital cameras to them. But you know what he called it? He called it filmless cameras. And they said, well, we're all about film. Why would we, that makes no sense. Had he called them digital cameras, they probably would be a mover and shaker in that industry. But it's about all of what we talked about before.
I had not heard that story. I like that. And it as it relates to being innovative and, on the cutting edge of things, is that you have to sometimes take a step back and say, this is novel and new, but instead of dismissing it out of hand, saying, let me sit with it, let me explore it a little deeper and see if there is a different way to brand it. And to your point, right? Filmless cameras, we're all about film. Digital cameras is a whole different message. And so being willing to take a step back and saying, how can we look at this differently, or how can this be couched or communicated in a different way that might resonate in a way that it wouldn't ordinarily. I just want to say this about technology, right? We're in sort of this heyday, on the front end of the heyday. Maybe we're deep in the heyday. I don't know where exactly, but this AI revolution, right? And first of all, AI is not new. And like people think that, AI came on the scene, at the end of 2022 when ChatGPT, or whenever 2023, and ChatGPT sort of was like all the rage, I guess, in the 2022. And that's not the case. Yeah. AI has been a part of just about everything we've been doing for a long time. And because it wasn't packaged the way it's been packaged for use by the masses, then maybe you're feeling like, this newfangled thing.
Right.
But it's not the case. And it's rarely the case for anything. By the time we hear about it, right, it's not particularly novel and new. And so being open to it and looking out for those trends actually is something that can set you apart as a leader, which is why it's important to be on top of what's happening in the news, to be a reader, which is something that we wholly advocate here, right? Leaders are readers, and taking the time to read things that allow you to grow, to stay on top of what's happening in the world.
Absolutely. And of course, to how should I say this? To rise to your challenge, I'm going to connect this to leverage. So this is
I love it.
You leverage technology, because that often the early adopters are the ones that leverage the technology to the point where it impacts them in a positive way. So like I said, you don't have to be those on the leading edge of that, but you should be paying attention and watching. And that leads me to my fourth one, which is effective leaders think strategically. They analyze situations and they anticipate outcomes. They look at those what if scenarios to see what could possibly happen based on what I am observing in the environment and what I am experiencing in the micro environment, their organization or their group. So strategic thinking is really, really important for effective leaders.
If someone had asked me To name something that would definitely be on your list, I would say strategic. Strategic thinking
As I was writing,
would definitely be on that list.
as I was writing it down, I almost put in parentheses, Whitney is going to tease me about this. Because as you know, I am big into strategy. And that's because, and I say this on the show, I've been a part of organizations that did it really poorly. And that really got me curious. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, why? There are thousands of books. Why not? Or thousands of books, hundreds of consultants that can help you do it. So, why is there such a difficulty in, thinking strategically,
Yeah.
using strategy as a leverage point in your organization to develop a competitive an advantage? So that's, it's very interesting. And that was the attraction for me.
Well, people are so often wrapped up in the what's needed now, right? Putting out fires, dealing with the day to day, I guess is the way I want to say that, right? When you're putting up with the day to day, that you feel like you don't have time or space or bandwidth to actually be strategic and forward thinking. And I would challenge that and say that the more strategic thinking you do, the less fire putting out you'll have to do on the back end. And not to say that you won't ever have that, because there are always things that are happening, going to happen, that you can't foresee, that you can't control, but you can minimize that by being more strategic in your thinking and planning and exploring what's on the horizon and what are the influence, external and internal, that can have an impact on what it is we're doing, and then make, based on your vision, do the things that you need to do to make it happen. But people tend to be much more tactical than I was going to say tactical than strategic.
We should coin that phrase, tactical. We should coin that, right? It'd be our trademark.
There you go. Which is the combo. It's the combo. But yes, people just tend to be more tactical because it helps you feel like you were doing something. And strategic thinking, for a lot of people, and it's similar, I think, to people's approach to self-care and taking care of themselves, slowing down. Sometimes you want to go faster, slow down, right? Get silent, go inward, be introspective, and let that propel how you move forward. So taking time for strategic thinking and strategic planning, for a lot of people, doesn't feel like you're actually doing anything. And so we are a culture of busyness and needing to feel like we're doing something all the time, where you can be more efficient by taking a step back, doing some strategic thinking and planning, and then more intentional, right, with the tactics that you actually employ to move you forward.
I see what you did there. That connection to simple right there. It's really funny. You reminded me of a story, and it's funny because this is the second time I've told this story this week. As you know, I'm a fan.
You haven't told it yet, though.
Well, I told it to somebody else, so I'm going to tell it now. So, as you know, I'm a fan of books, and I was known for reading on the job. As part of, I'm a trainer, I'm an OD person. Part of my job is educating others, and so in order to do that, I needed to understand and learn some things. And I remember, and it wasn't like I would spend all day doing this thing. I would spend a half an hour reading about something on the job and then looking for ways to apply it, how to be strategic with it. And I remember we had an initiative. We were changing two parts of this. prior to me getting into the organization, their performance appraisal system was paper-based. And we got a new HR system that allowed it to be electronic. So that was my job, to create the electronic framework for the new electronic performance appraisal system. The second aspect so this is an organization of 75 managers, and 1,000 people there. Not overly large, but fairly large. And my manager was like, okay, I want you to train everybody on this. And, but it needs to be done like really quickly. It wasn't like I had time to, do some instructional design, put this thing together. I was designing the system and he wanted me to design the training too. So what I did was I created, using PowerPoint, because the way you can do this, a self-learning system. So I would send people this PowerPoint thing and they would click on it, and I used hyperlinks and all this stuff, and it would give them answers. It was basically computer-based learning, but with a PowerPoint system. And I read a book that taught me how to do that. And when I sent it to him, he looked at it and he was like, "This is amazing. How did you learn to do this?" I said, "You know that thing that you see me doing that you don't want me to do?" Which is reading. I said, "That's how I learned to do this." And he was like, "Because I won't bother you about that ever again." And it was a huge success. But you have to spend some time, thinking strategically, educating yourself, and that will allow you to look ahead. So I was thinking strategically about this. How am I going to do this? How am I going to, in the short time frame, get this out to people so they could learn the system, if I don't have the ability to go out there and do it face to face?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you told that story for the second time. Now you have told it the second time.
Thank you. I hated feeling like a liar. Oh, so the next thing on my list is they help their team through change. And that's really connected to everything that we've talked about, because if you have a vision and it's new, it's probably going to take you in a different direction. If you're looking at strategy, or if you're thinking strategically, you may want to pivot and do something differently. That's going to involve change. People will be doing things differently than they had been doing them before.
I absolutely agree. And let's see, purposefulness, right, for that, and managing change and energy. I can see that running through, because with energy, you are that pivot one, and bringing people in and helping them to, and I would tie this to something that's on my list, that may be on your list as well, but tying that back to emotional intelligence, right? Because people often have challenge with change. And so helping your team members manage their emotions around change, and taking the time to recognize that flexibility is a huge part of what teams need to employ if they're going to be successful. And there are opportunities in that for feedback loops, and an opportunity for a leader to put on their empathy cap, right, as they are getting feedback from members of their team, often in the form of resistance about that change. So some things to keep aware there.
How long have we known each other? This is really funny.
It's 11 years.
11 years.
11 years.
And what, I don't know how many people are watching the show today, but we don't plan this out. We grab a topic and then we each run with it, and then we meet on the show. The only time that we kind of plan something out is when we have interviews, but that's still kind of rough and ready. But the next thing on my list is validate others' experiences and emotions. So it's that emotional intelligence component to that, which is really important. And a lot of times, leaders sometimes get caught into this you said loop, but they only look at things from their perspective. They
Yeah.
only see how they feel, and they kind of squash or minimize other people's experiences or emotions. One of the things that I tell my clients all the time is how people feel is their business, right? People have a right to feel the way they feel about stuff. Even if you don't agree, your emotions belong to you. Who am I to tell you that you shouldn't feel the way you feel about something? So I'm right there with you on that one.
And I love that you said that. And it's not right. Your job as a leader, as it relates to emotional intelligence, your own and others, right? Because part of you being an emotionally intelligent leader is helping others manage their emotions, right? So, just quickly, there are the basic four components. There is self-awareness, which we are huge on. It's a part of, it's a pillar of simple. So self-awareness, your self-mastery of your emotions, managing your emotions, awareness of others, and then helping them manage their emotions, right? And you're so right. It's not about you telling someone that their emotions or what they're feeling is wrong or incorrect or inappropriate, but it's about managing those emotions as they are bubbling to the surface, whatever they are, right? And so it's being responsive to the emotions of others and helping them to direct that energy, that emotional energy, for constructive outcomes. And if you can do that, help them manage those emotions, particularly around the topic of change, where you know that members of your team may not be the best at handling or managing change. And then again, recognizing that a lot of times the resistance that presents itself around change isn't that they are anti-change, they are trying to process what they're going through, and or they have some feedback that could be helpful for you, the organization, to be aware of when it comes to what that change is, and making sure that you've thought it through, right? And that you've considered the options, whether or not it's good for your organization or not, all the things around that,
Yeah.
not just making an assumption that people are anti-change because they have some emotional resistance around it.
Right. And there's also, we talked about this in one of the webinars that we did, the marathon effect. Often leaders experience the change well before they introduce it to their team. They've heard about it. They're probably the one that decided to bring it into the organization. So they've already had that emotional transition inside themselves. And then after they've lived with it for maybe a month or maybe even 3 months, they decide to bring it, to their people, and they wonder why their people are not accepting it right away. And they forget that, well, you've had a couple of months
Yeah.
to get acclimated to this. You've thought about the pros and cons of it. You've looked at it, and then you went through that. I don't really like it. Oh, maybe it's going to change how I work. Okay, then you come to accept it. It took you a while to get there.
Yeah.
In some cases, your people need to go through that same path. But people, since they have that title of leader, director, executive, whatever it is, they expect that alone is going to make people transition into that faster. And it doesn't work that way.
And recognizing that there's a cycle, right? That there is a pathway through. You can help me if I miss something. Denial,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, whatever the process.
Anger.
Anger.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
and then you start to process in acceptance,
Yeah.
right? And so, you know, sort of it's your job to help them move through that. And so if you will recognize that there is a and we should probably spend some time on that whole thing. You know, the cycle of change,
Yeah.
right? Which is an outgrowth of Kubler-Ross's grief,
Yeah.
right? Because change is managing emotions around change is about grief, about the death of what was, right? Moving into the new thing of what is or what will be, and allowing people to, you know, process what they're feeling around that. And so often it gets lost that it takes time. And so your point is well taken. You know, if you're introducing some sort of change process, you've been thinking about it for a while, and if you've had some reaction to that, that you've processed it and others haven't. And so giving people the space to do that is quite important.
Absolutely. And by the way, and for those of you who don't know, it's called the marathon effect because when you run a marathon, when a marathon is being, you know,
Run.
run, or I want to say officiated, right? The officials put the people with the faster times in the front. You don't put the
Yes.
slow people in the front
No,
because, you know, then the
I'm
faster
always at the back of the pack.
right. So you put the fast people in front. That's why it's called the marathon effect, because the people in the front will get to the landmarks much faster than the people in the back who are the slower people, late adopters, if you want to put it that way. Yes, I think we're going to get through all of them. So number 7, we're at number 7 already, is successful leaders acknowledge their weaknesses and address them. And that is the self-awareness portion of simple here. So it's really knowing what you're good at. And we're not talking about leading with your strengths. That could be a completely different episode, but we're talking about understanding what you're not so good at, your deficiencies, and crafting a plan to get better, address them, or move them so that they're not detrimental to your team or to your organization, or, you know, don't put them someplace where they're not going to be as detrimental as they are. But I'm a big fan of working on them.
I agree. And I would tie that to, on my list, phrased differently, would be being willing to embrace a growth mindset, right? That in terms of recognizing where your weaknesses lie, and that there are opportunities for improvement, and there are always opportunities for improvement, even in your strengths, that there are opportunities to look and see what can be developed, and not just you, but members of your team, right? Being willing to be, again, open to feedback, being someone who is resilient, and not taking things personally. So it's viewing your weaknesses as an opportunity, right? It's a challenge. It's an opportunity to grow, that rather than trying to hide them and pretend that they're not there, that you can see them as an opportunity to learn, to grow, and 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 right, that, and we talk about this quite frequently, I think, being willing to take some risk, right, to make some mistakes, and to see failure as a part of the learning process. So this obviously ties into mastery, right? Pursuing mastery is about continuous learning and improvement, and um, dedication and hard work that it takes in order to do that, and to be okay with that, which I think also ties into purposefulness, and that um your recognizing that your purpose as a leader, right? And all the things that been mentioned, leading by example, right? Being emotionally intelligent, strategic thinking, that those are things that are actually part of your purpose as a leader for yourself and others. And so acknowledging your weaknesses, your strengths, your weaknesses, and then being willing to work on them is a huge part of your success.
Absolutely. So where are we? I was
Number 8.
number 8. That's embracing complementary ideas and perspectives, and that's something that came up in the very top of the show because um, we don't always have the same ideas about things. We don't always agree on certain things, and it allows us the opportunity to look at things from different angles and see things differently, and maybe adjust the mindset or mental model that we had. So that's number 8 on my list.
So it's interesting that you said that, and it's interesting that I said that because when I'm actually thinking about it, and this leads to something on my list, but it flows directly from the embracing ideas and that willingness to listen to others. In my list is being an active listener, right? A
Mhm.
dynamic listener, because embracing ideas, other people's ideas and perspectives, is about your willingness to listen to other people, to respect ideas that may be different from yours. And what happens when you are an active listener is that it helps you to build trust, and it encourages open communication. And so if you can't embrace ideas if you don't allow yourself to hear ideas or
Right.
thoughts or perspectives that are not your own,
Right.
right? And so, in order to do that, you have to be an active listener, which is giving your undivided attention to people, taking the time to connect with them, right? Making eye contact, not being distracted, and doing other things. I teach some training that I do around this, in both a collaboration course that I train and some leadership courses that I train in, is making that, recognizing that communication and your role as a listener is mostly nonverbal, right? And so, like, 93% of communication is nonverbal, and 7% are the words that you're using. And so, taking the time to communicate with your body, with your eye contact, with your body language, that you are there and engaged and not somewhere else, right? And a huge part of your success as a leader is to be here now, right? And not somewhere else with it all. And we, I get it. We get it. You have a million things on your list that need addressing, and people that need things from you, but you have to be here now with whatever is going on right here in order to make sure that people feel heard and that you are connecting to whatever ideas and perspectives that they're sharing.
Absolutely. And as you were talking, something came to mind about really embracing complementary ideas. There are many leaders that don't do that. There are many leaders that fully expect that whatever idea they have is the best.
Mm,
I worked with CEOs that they were really, really kind of known for taking ideas from their folks and presenting them as their own. And if so, it's a weird thing that happens. And those CEOs are seen as being successful. And I want to put this out there that you can have a level of success by not doing these things. right? A level of success, or have the appearance of being successful. Just like somebody who is, has a lot of money can appear to be happy, but they're not. Uh, so really what we're talking about is to be truly effective and successful is to embrace these ideas, and some of these ideas. Of course, you may not do all of them, but these are just our list of things that we've seen truly successful leaders do. Because you can have the appearance of being successful. You can sit in the boardroom and have everyone around you nod their head yes at everything you say and tell you how great you are, and your organization can do okay. But do you want your organization to do okay, or do you want your organization to do great? And I think that's the difference between, having someone who has the appearance of success and someone who is really successful.
I love what you just said. It reminds me of an organization I was in, and the board, and some initiatives that were started, and board members sort of nodding their head, going along. And then after meetings were over, going out into the hallway and then having these deep discussions about what just happened and why they said yes. And asking questions like, well, the time for you to ask questions was when you were in the board. It coming out into the hallway after a vote's been taken and having a conversation is not very helpful, right? And so don't be that leader.
Yeah, it's and one day I'll look this up, because there's a couple of archetypes for the types of leadership teams there are, and what a lot of CEOs like is an archetype called the royal court, where everyone exists to just agree with you and tell you how great you are, and that is not very effective. And I have to look up these other archetypes so I can bring them forward to the show. But I remember when I first read that when we were in grad school, I remember going, "That's my organization." You could not disagree with the CEO, so much to the point where he would ask you to disagree with him. No one would, because they felt it was a trap.
Yeah.
It was like,
no, I've been, and we didn't work for the same organization, but we worked for the same organization.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's like, if you don't agree with me, and not only will I castigate you and humiliate you in a room full of your peers, I will then punish you afterward. And then came the time when the CEO really needed a complimentary idea, and no one would give it, because everyone was terrified that, oh, he's just trying to trap me. Because last year, when I told him something different than what he said, he blasted me and humiliated me, and I never spoke up. And now he's asking sincerely, and no one would bite. Needless to say, I didn't point it out to him. I was like, well, he'll have to figure that one out on his own. Number 9. So number 9 is very much tied into that, or tied into some of the other things we talked about, and that is they share information freely. I knew that one would get you. They share information freely, and we don't mean sharing everything, but sharing things that are going to impact the people that are on your team. I've worked for organizations where information was kind of like currency, and the leadership hoarded it, and you would get it in dribs and drabs. But what started to happen was, when it started to leak out, it wasn't accurate. And so you had misinformation out there. You had people, thinking that they had the right information, and they would start working on the wrong things, trying to anticipate what was going to come down from the top. And it was a waste of time and resources. And so they share information freely.
I know, it's one of my bigger pet peeves. doesn't serve the organization to hoard information. Eh, so yes, share
Right.
freely.
Share freely.
And I would say, looking at the simple aspect of this, it's like check your motives at the door, right? Get some self-awareness of why around why you would do that. Why would you hold on to information if you think that information is power, right? That the best way to amass your power, or is there a different way, a more effective and efficient way to get the power that you're after? So just
Yeah, and I want to add another wrinkle to that, because what you said is really important, but sometimes it's not so hard for people to be so self-aware when it's part of the culture. When it's part of the culture, you kind of become a robot to your culture. Everybody has an ethnical culture. We have our home culture. We have our
ethical.
our ethnicity, our culture with our ethnicity. I meant to say.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, I couldn't think of the real, PC way to say that. We have culture that is connected to our homes. We have culture connected, maybe even to our neighborhoods. So,
Yeah.
and if you've been connected to that culture for many, many years, you become blind to it. You don't, and so not sharing information may be part of the culture, and you just don't get it, right? You just don't.
Right.
So
Right.
you're just doing what everyone else does, and then
Right.
so it's that, like you said, it's that self-awareness part to realize, why am I doing this? Why am I hanging on to this information? Why am I not sharing information with the people it's going to impact? And it becomes really important when you notice, or you see that not having that information is impacting those folks in a negative way. You need
Right.
to stop and go, okay, let's take a look at the root cause of this issue. Why are we late getting this thing out? How come we were late switching over? We couldn't pivot to things. Like many people, we talked about the pandemic. There was a lot of people that had information about that, that just didn't act on it quickly enough,
Yeah.
and we saw how it affected everyone.
No, it's I'll just leave it there for now. Check check your motives at the door, right? It's important to, in all of these things, to know why you do what you do and what it is that you think you're going to get out of doing it the way that you're doing it. And you're absolutely right that the culture that you're in, which is the way things get done, and if you are in a culture and things are done differently than the way that you would have done it naturally, it and you feel like you're constantly bumping your head up against a wall, then you can definitely start doing things differently. Maybe the better approach would be to consider that that's not the culture for you.
Yeah,
Just
yeah. Uh,
right, a consideration, not telling you to leave, but if that's not the culture for you and you are not able to have an impact and turn that around, then maybe that's not the culture for you.
Absolutely. And last on my list is, effective leaders or successful leaders demonstrate integrity, and they lead ethically. So I said ethnical before, but now it's ethical. So you lead, yeah, ethically. Um, you don't do things that are going to compromise your reputation, the reputation of your team, the reputation of your company. You do things that you could look back on and be proud of.
Mm.
And sometimes it's easier said than done, especially when you work for an organization whose culture does not really lend itself to being ethical. Um, but you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror. I've worked with organizations that have done um, some things that I didn't quite think were ethical. And, I brought those things forward to some of the managers I worked with, and they didn't see a problem with it.
Mm.
It,
Mhm.
it was part of the culture that, it's okay to do this thing. But you have to know what you're okay with. I worked with an organization that would frequently steal the intellectual property of other organizations and say, well, we're going to do that here. And I'd be like, I'm not going to do that here. I will bargain with you to do something different, but I don't feel comfortable taking something that is branded by another organization and removing their name from it and just doing it here. I don't agree with that. So
No, I feel you on that, and I'm gonna just expand that so that I can get my last one in. Just expand that concept of integrity and is a culture of accountability,
yeah,
right? And being accountable to what you are responsible for. So owning what's yours, being honest and transparent about what's yours, and then committing to getting it done
yeah,
and doing it. That means not throwing other people under the bus. That means not taking credit for things that are not yours. All right. And this is important because it enhances performance, and it allows you to build trust within the team.
yeah,
And how do you get to a culture of integrity and accountability? Being clear about roles, what people are doing, their responsibilities, your organization's goals. And again, here's an opportunity for you to lead by example, right?
absolutely.
And leveraging, going to simple, leveraging the collective strengths of the people on your team, and making sure again everyone understands what they are doing, what they bring to the table, and then allowing them um, to be transparent about what they do, what they don't do, as you're holding them
Absolutely.
accountable.
Absolutely. So we got through all 10 of
We got the woohoo.
them.
Wow. I love that we did that. And it's nice to have a top 10. And the top 10 ways that you can be successful, that you can lead successful, that you are successfully leading. So we would love to hear from you. Which one of those are, and check the comments to make sure I didn't miss anything. But which one are, oh, my earpiece fell out.
Uh-oh. And is it lodged in your hair?
Which ones are you currently using? Right? Which ones are you currently using? And which ones are you not using? Or what would you add to the list? What are things that you're doing as a successful leader that you would add to the list? We'd love to hear from you. And so feel free to drop us a note. And if someone wanted to get in touch with you, Robert, how would they go about doing that?
You can email me at inspireme@roberthilliardcoaching.com, or just go over to my website, Robert Hilliard Coaching, and look at the contact me portion there, fill out the form. Let me know what goals or challenges you're struggling with, and you can schedule a call with me.
Awesome. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can reach out at shiftingintoaction.now.site. Shiftingintoaction.now.site. You can complete the form there, and I will connect with you for an exploratory call. Or if you want to leave a message about something that you would like for us to cover, you can also leave that in the comments to this post. So, with that, We want to thank you for joining us. And whether you watched us on LinkedIn, whether you've watched us on YouTube or in a Facebook group, we appreciate your time. Like, if you're on YouTube, subscribe so that you and hit the notification bell so that you will know the next time we are coming to you live, which we do on Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. And until next time, take care.
Bye now.